My name is Patrick O'Brien. I work at a company called The Trade Desk. At The Trade Desk, our mission is to change the way digital advertising is bought and sold. And our Ventura, California office is very nice to visit during the long, cold Portland winters. Joined The Trade Desk in 2016. I've lived in Portland since 2012. I like the normal Portland stuff, camping, outdoors, dogs. I do not like avocados. It's texture, it's taste. They're just gross. When I first started The Trade Desk, it was suggested I look into an issue that had been growing along with the company. We were spending too much money on Amazon's S3 service. Links between our data centers and AWS were getting saturated, and releases were being delayed. So 2 weeks in, it's kind of my favorite time to work at a job. You aren't bogged down by past projects following you. You aren't a subject matter expert on anything yet, and you have time to dig into things without distractions. There are many proposed solutions before I got there. All of them would require a decent amount of work and code changes, and all of them were super tempting to look into. Damn. So in an ideal world, we'd have a few weeks to investigate all the different options thrown out there. After that, you'd have a few more weeks to implement the POCs. After that, a few more weeks to do code changes, to test out everything. After that, non-production testing, so on and so forth. But the reality is, we don't always have that luxury of time. It's just a fact of the matter. Things are on fire, things are falling over. Every company I've ever worked at, this has been the case. And so my first question when I got assigned this was, what about a caching proxy? It hadn't been suggested before. Caching proxies are very widely understood. Caching proxies are fairly straightforward to monitor and troubleshoot. Worst comes to worst, you just start curling it. But the one problem with caching proxies is that you can't cache HTTPS objects that are fetched. Most proxies support fetching objects with the connect method, but you can't cache. Enter Apache Traffic Server. It's a forward and reverse proxy, open source by Yahoo in 2009. It was made a top-level Apache project in 2010, and it has many, many, many knobs to turn. And so we solved the problem of caching HTTPS objects by having the client make plain HTTP connections to the proxy. From there, using Apache Traffic Server's URL remapping service, we were able to have the call go to AWS as HTTPS. The second one is that there's a plugin built into Apache Traffic Server that lets you sign your AWS requests. This is sort of terrifying, but there's knobs to turn to limit the blast radius. And the last problem was that none of our applications were writing any of these files out with any cache control headers. And we had many different applications writing these. We kind of did the easy thing of just forcing caching. So here's a code change example for some Ruby scripts. This is basically what we had to do for a small chunk of our infrastructure. We started with curl, moved on to something I'm more familiar with, which is Ruby. And then we moved on to our C# and PowerShell, which kind of did the bulk of deployment things and did the bulk of business logic rules. I'm super grateful for our engineers because they did the heavy lifting for this piece since I'm not super familiar with C#. So the biggest question is, how has it been performing for the last 2 years? The first thing that happened was our 1 gig NIC host got saturated. Second thing that happened was our 10 gig NIC host got saturated. But after a while, in our largest data centers, we saw about $10,000 a month saved in transfer costs alone from S3. And across all of our data centers, it's added up to nearly $1 million saved so far since we launched. And kind of why do this? I love open source. It's fantastic. This was a 3-week investment for a new employee who's not expected to do that much in the first place. Were there better solutions? Probably. But this is easy to monitor, it's easy to troubleshoot, it's easy to maintain, and it's lasted us this long. So far we're 2 years into using this, and so far the main constraint we found has been bandwidth to the proxy servers. And so with that said, we're hiring. Our kind of selling point is we handle 10.5 million requests a second. So if you want to see how we do that and you want to work on an infrastructure with that, here's the URL.